Hello, my name is Erin Scott and I'm part of the new Inspire Learning team. It's an absolute pleasure to be joined here today by Liz Pinder and Kirsty Banks, who are early years specialists, and they will be co-presenting the session with me today. So this is session 3 of our Numeracy Professional Learning series, and the focus for today's session is around effective numeracy and mathematics learning. So we're going to start our session today by going over our key aims. So we have 3 main aims that we're going to focus on today. The first key aim is to develop our understanding around the key principles of retrieval practice and interleaving of concepts, and these are going to influence our teaching and learning. Our second key aim is to develop an understanding of how to effectively structure a numeracy and mathematics lesson or a learning episode, so a series of lessons based on current research and evidence. And our third key aim of today is to provide strategies, ideas and suggestions around rich mathematical tasks and the reasons why we are promoting and advocating these within the classroom. Similarly to our other professional learning training sessions, this session today will follow a similar format, where we're going to have some core input where we share some of the research and evidence around the concepts we're thinking about. Peppered throughout that, we're going to then have reflective questions where you'll be able to pause the training video in your staff teams and undertake professional discussion and collaboration around different activities. We're then going to have some follow-up activities that you will get to do either as part of today's session or maybe tasks or activities to go away with depending on your staff team today. But hopefully these different components are going to lead to some new understanding at the end of our session, or even just some new ideas and strategies to go away and think about. So before we dive straight into our core input for today, we would like to start with a starter task that's hopefully again going to promote some of the key mathematical thinking, mathematical values that we're trying to promote in the Scottish Borders. So this task is called Which One Doesn't Belong? So on the screen in front of you, you will see a square that is split into 4 different boxes, and within each there is a number. So we would like you, just in a little second, to pause the video and in your staff teams discuss which number do you think doesn't belong. Thank you. So just restart the video when you've had plenty of time to discuss. Thank you very much for having a go and engaging with the starter task. So hopefully lots of interesting discussion came out of your groups and in your staff teams. Things that you might have come out with are that you maybe think 9 is the odd one out because it is the only single digit and the other 3 numbers are all 2-digit numbers. Something else that might have come out of your discussion is that maybe you thought it was 16 and you were drawn to that first because it's the only even number and the other 3 numbers are all odd numbers. Or the thing you might have been drawn to first is maybe the fact that you felt 43 was definitely the odd one out because 9, 16 and 25 are all square numbers. So from this task, it's really nice because there is a bit of flexibility. There is not just one right answer, and it's allowing us to see if our learners have that mathematical vocabulary, where is their understanding around number, and again, just a really rich way to get that lovely collaboration and that mathematical talk and discussion within your class. So we will come on and discuss this slightly more later in the presentation, but hopefully you've all found that a useful starter task today. So we're now going to jump straight in with our first reflective question of today. So in your staff teams with your colleagues, we would like you to think about and discuss what do you feel are the key features of an effective numeracy and maths lesson. So if you could take just the next 5 to 10 minutes, pause the video and discuss this in your staff teams. Thank you very much for taking the time to discuss that within your staff teams. I'm sure that many similarities came out in relation to the highly effective features of a numeracy and maths lesson. So one of the first ones that we would just really like to promote and advocate is the power of having an exciting and engaging hook. Because this allows you just to make the learning relevant, and it allows you to make all those lovely connections to everyday life that we know is so fundamental and so important for our learners. So we're now just going to come on and just kind of suggest and consider a few things around that exciting hook. So one really effective hook can be to use that of a story. And in our professional learning around culture, ethos and environment, we shared about using the maths through storytelling approach. But this can be a really nice way to either introduce a new learning concept or to retrieve information and then do that retrieval practice about what learners already know. And it might be that through a mathematical story that you cover it over a period of a few weeks and that you go back to it. But it's really nice because it's making all those links with everyday life and can act as a really exciting hook. So another really powerful hook can be to link your numeracy and mathematics learning to your IDL topic, which might provide a really rich context with lots of everyday life examples in which to deliver and teach a lot of your numeracy through. So you might think about that in relation to historical context, whether that be like the Romans or looking at exploring Titanic. Maybe geographical different topics, like thinking whether that be about the rainforest, and there'll be lots of data, lots of facts, lots of figures, and lots of numeracy and mathematics that could be pulled out of that, whether that be looking at graphs or statistics linked with that. Then thinking potentially about climate or sustainability, that type of thing. There is an awful lot of numeracy and mathematics learning that could be pulled out of those kind of rich IDL topics. And something else to consider would just be that around your kind of religious, moral education topics. So say, for example, Islamic art, you can see on the screen in front of you, which is thinking about pattern, thinking about shape, thinking about design, and also even kind of looking at that mosque that you can see, really thinking about symmetry and those symmetrical patterns. So I think what's really important is to look ahead, to proactively think about the different IDL topics that you're going to be exploring and covering, and the rich numeracy and mathematics that you could pull out of that as part of that. So this emphasises the importance of thinking about numeracy and mathematics across the curriculum. What are all the different links that we can make and embed within our practice? So thinking, like we've just spoken about, in relation to art, in relation to science or technology. Something that's also really worth looking at is the Data Education in Schools website. So they've done a lot of work around data literacy and around the data cycle, so it can be really nice when thinking about any data analysis work. But they have a huge variety of suggested activities and tasks and different things to think about with your learners. So I would definitely recommend investigating that as a wee website. So another powerful hook that is available is considering the national and international initiatives like Maths Week Scotland or National Numeracy Day or Outdoor Classroom Day. There's also International STEM Day, and very often these events are peppered throughout the academic year, but it's really nice to consider and proactively look ahead and think about these in your planning. Very often they have maybe a theme for that year. For example, Maths Week Scotland 2024, the theme is Numeracy Tales. So again, just a really nice way to be able to act as a hook. Most of these events have websites, and what they provide is, a range of ideas and resources, sometimes like activity packs that you can do with your learners. But again, just a really kind of rich way of maybe bringing in different numeracy concepts. So a really nice hook to think about and use within your planning. To support you to do this, there is the Numeracy and Mathematics Plan, which is available to all schools. And through using this planner, you could record your IDL within this and think about specifically what is the numeracy and mathematics that could be pulled out of that, and just to help you kind of see about the relevance of that across each block within an academic year. So we're now going to move on and explore some of the key high-level pedagogical considerations that we want to be thinking about within our planning, not just for the structure of one lesson, but also that of a series of lessons. So we're now going to unpick some of the key principles. So the first key consideration that we're going to explore today is that of prior knowledge. Now, we already know that prior knowledge is a major factor in our capacity to learn new information. So as skilled practitioners, it's really important that we give our learners lots of opportunities to tap into that prior knowledge. We need to identify what is already transferred from their working term memory into their long-term memory. What have they retained? What have they remembered from one lesson to the next, from one week to the next? And it's our job to maybe investigate that through the use of skilled questioning, through the use of tasks, and all of this gets referred to as retrieval practice. So we're now going to come on and unpick a little bit more about retrieval practice. So retrieval practice works whereby we give our learners the opportunity to return to previously learned content or concepts or practicing a particular numeracy and mathematics skill. As humans, if we don't retrieve information from our brains frequently enough, we do lose it. So retrieval practice can be so powerful as it allows us to strengthen those neural pathways, and it allows us to continue to be able to develop fluency and almost that automaticity with how we can recall and retrieve facts and information. And this is all kind of based on the cognitive load theory. And this is why it is so crucial that we get this right within our practice. So if we're able to retrieve things more fluently from our long-term memory, it means that our working term memory isn't as overloaded. So it actually has the capacity to be able to focus on new content and new information. So that's why within our planning, we really need to think carefully around how are we giving our learners the opportunities to retrieve, to practice, to revise that previously learned content. But this doesn't mean that you just keep going back over the same thing time and time again. You want to keep revisiting things, but you want to consider that spiral curriculum. So you want a very gradual increase in complexity or how learners are having to apply that knowledge and skill. So the next key principle that we're going to consider and explore is that of interleaving. Now, interleaving builds on retrieval practice. They're very much linked. So that is where you're giving learners the opportunity to practice not just one concept, but you're maybe integrating and embedding a few concepts together. So learners are having the opportunity to practice questions, but they're having to think because they don't actually know that it's not the whole bank of 10 questions is all going to be addition and subtraction. And this can be a really strong, powerful way, and research has highlighted that can dramatically improve learners' ability to retain and maintain that learning in their long-term memory. So our next principle that we're going to consider is around that of visibly random groups. So this comes from the work of Peter Lilligel on building thinking classrooms, and we touched on this in our first professional learning session on culture, ethos and environment. And what the building thinking classrooms research advocates is just the power in having that not mixed ability groups chosen by the teacher, but they are clearly visible. And they advocate using a set of playing cards to do that. And learners will pick a playing card and that will determine which group they are in. And they feel that this has really strong, and there's really strong evidence that this can improve mathematical thinking, it can improve learners' ability to learn from each other and be that peer support to each other. So again, something that we just want to think about in our practice, are we already using this, or is this something that we could maybe think about? And there might be key parts of the lesson that we're going to come on and discuss where this fits really well. So for example, with these open, rich starter tasks, for your kind of problem solving tasks, this is where we're wanting to encourage the use of visibly random groups. So we have now just explored some of the key overarching considerations and principles that we really want to think about within our planning and teaching. But now we want to narrow that focus and that lens down, and we want to think about the structure of a lesson and think about just some of the key high-level messages around what that should look like, what key things should we include. So I hope you find this useful, and we will just get started now. So the key elements that we are now going to go on and explore in detail are firstly, rich open starter tasks that are open-ended. Counting development, so we're going to think about forwards number word sequences, backward number word sequences and counting in multiples and what that can look like. We're going to think about that introduction of new learning and importance of building on prior knowledge, and we're going to explore that. We're then going to think about guided practice with a focus on modelling. After that, we're going to discuss the balance between whole class or flexible maths groups. And we're going to go on and explore deliberate practice considerations, thinking about interleaving, thinking about rich tasks, and exploring mathematical connections. And finally, we're going to have a think about the plenary and what that might look like. So just before we jump in to exploring our rich starter tasks, I just wanted to draw our attention to these 4 elements that are on the screen now. So that is conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, mathematical reasoning, and problem solving. Now, it's really important that we just take time as we're going through the different parts of our components of our lesson today, that we're thinking about how are we developing these 4 elements in our learners. So conceptual understanding is that ability to really build learners' understanding of a concept. And a big part of that is going to be embedding the CPA approaches, so learners can build those models and those visual representations and those structures around particular maths concepts. Thinking today, how are we building learners' procedural fluency? So that's learners' ability to be able to undertake a calculation, to follow a procedure. And there's 3 key elements of procedural fluency that are flexibility, accuracy, and efficiency. So again, thinking about those 3 key elements within procedural fluency. And how are we giving our learners opportunities to develop their mathematical reasoning skills? So that ability to follow logical steps and to kind of explain, justify, and defend their mathematical thinking. And these 3 kind of key elements really feed in to that ability to problem solve, that ability where learners can figure out what to do in unseen and unfamiliar contexts, which are maybe slightly, which are different to what they've maybe experienced as part of their deliberate practice. So as we're progressing through our training today, keep thinking about these really high level 4 overarching key elements. So we're now going to come on and explore our different types of starter tasks. So as we've already said, we're really wanting to promote those rich, open-ended starter tasks that have a low floor, high ceiling. So that means that they're accessible to the vast majority of learners within our class. So we are able to do these near enough whole class. And with these tasks, they offer a great degree of flexibility, which means we can really promote that mathematical talk, that mathematical vocabulary, and children can discuss their mathematical thinking, which is what we're really wanting to instill and promote. So this first activity we actually shared as part of the starter tasks today. So this is called Which One Doesn't Belong? Now this is a website that you can access. We've included the QR code on the slide, so if you scan that, it will take you directly to the website. Now these are free, and they provide a range of either numbers, or it might be visuals or pictures, but this allows your learner to think about which one maybe do they think doesn't fit. There isn't a right or wrong answer. Very often there are multiple different strategies or different suggestions, but this is a really effective way to promote that mathematical talk, to get learners using that vocabulary and thinking about making those rich connections. And this can be a really nice task for learners to do collaboratively with a partner or discussing in small groups. The next suggestion is called Same But Different. And similarly to Which One Doesn't Belong, this is a free website. So I've included the QR code on the screen. So if you click that or scan that, it will just take you directly to the website. But on this website, there is a range of different visuals and pictures. And what's really nice about these is they're demonstrating different maths concepts, different ideas, and it's allowing the learner to unpick their thinking around what is the same about them and then what is different. So this is obviously a place value example that you can see on the screen in front of you. And you can see that it's 25, and that could either be created from 2 10s and 5 ones, or this is allowing the learner to unpick, well, actually 25 could also be created from 1 10 and then 15 ones, that non-canonical form that we're thinking about, non-standard form. So what it's really allowing your learners to do is, in a really open-ended, flexible way, it's allowing them to share their thinking, share their mathematical language and their mathematical vocabulary. Our next strategy is around the use of think boards, and these are often created using the Fourier model. So think boards are a brilliant way for establishing learners' understanding of different concepts and allowing them to maybe demonstrate that thinking in a multitude of different ways. So that could be using concrete manipulatives, pictorial approaches, maybe a written word problem, using different types of diagrams to demonstrate their thinking. But it's a really nice way to unpick that depth of understanding. So the next activity could actually be used at different points within your lesson or dependent on what stage your learners are at, but we're just showcasing it here as part of the starter tasks. So it's quite similar to a think board. This is a really nice way to establish learners' different strategies and what they currently are able to use, what they have within their capacity and what they can maybe be quite flexible with. So you would pose maybe a calculation or a question. The example on the board is 47 add 28. And then what you're looking for your learners to do is in each box to maybe demonstrate a different strategy or how could they add those two numbers together. So again, it's a really nice way just to establish their mathematical thinking and where are they in relation to that understanding of the different strategies. A further strategy would be to try using a number of the day. And in this example on the screen, you can see the number the learners have been given is the number 39. And then you can see that the learner has brought in a variety of concrete manipulatives to demonstrate their understanding of that, whether that be bundling sticks or place value counters or Dean's materials. You can also see that the learner has brought in a variety of pictorial approaches, so your part whole model, your 10 frames, your number line, your 100 square. And then you can see that they've brought in their understanding of the abstract calculation and how they can build different calculations to make the answer of 39. You can see that they've also written 39 in words. So using this kind of strategy allows you to really embed that CPA approach and to see where learners are with both the concrete, the pictorial, and then what they're able to do in relation to the abstract. Another really useful starter task is to practice that of subitizing. So subitizing is a key skill, and like any others, if it's not used, we can get really rusty. So it's really important we're not just giving our learners opportunities in primary 1 and primary 2 to practice their subitizing skills, but throughout the rest of primary as well. We know that in early years it forms a massive proportion of the early years number work, especially conceptual subitizing, where learners can look at a small quantity and they can say how many there is without having to count them. And learners will be familiar with the sentence stems of what do you see and then how do you see them. And this approach discourages children from counting in ones, and it allows them to notice groups that have the same features and to count in those smaller groups and build them up to form a total. So you can see images like the different ones on the board with the fish or with the people, and these kind of images can be used to allow for that rich discussion because learners will see them differently. But again, a really nice starter task that can be really open and really rich and unpick that mathematical thinking and allow for multiple solutions. The IC Reasoning Gareth Metcalfe resource can also be really useful to try and promote that rich mathematical reasoning and problem-solving skills. And within these PDFs, there's a range of tasks which the learners need to unpick. But what's really nice is they're using a lot of the pictorial approaches that we're advocating, like 10 frames and part whole models, maybe using place value counters. So again, it's kind of considering that CPA approach. What has been really nice with the Gareth Metcalfe resources are kind of allowing learners to either discuss their thinking with a partner or in small groups, and giving them the opportunity to explain their thinking, to share their ideas. So again, just another little strategy that might be able to be used as a starter task. Using the number talks approach can also be a really strong starter task. And this is building on our training from session 1 on culture, ethos and environment, where we explored number talks and the kind of theory behind it and kind of how it can work in practice. So today we're just touching on it, but we just want to advocate that it is a really strong pedagogical method for developing children's number sense, for allowing them to build that mathematical vocabulary, for giving them the opportunity to develop that mental flexibility and build their understanding of strategies. And it's a really nice way for that collaborative discussion within your class. So again, something we would really recommend as a rich starter task. So within the work of building thinking classrooms, they advocate the power of starting your mathematics lessons with a problem-solving task. And in the book by Peter Lillijal, he presents this very old task. You can see from the board that it actually came out in 1880, so quite a long time ago. And actually, so the content of this task, whilst it's not really appropriate, the wording for primary age children, what I thought it was really nice just to showcase is how we go about tackling it. So I would love you just to pause the video now, and in your staff teams, just take a few minutes to unpick this problem solving task. What mathematical skills did you need? What knowledge did you need to be able to solve it? Was there any kind of connections between mathematical concepts? And have a little discussion in your teams now. Thank you. So this planning tool has been created to help support you to decide which starter activities you would like to use across your week with your learners. So when we're thinking about the starter activities, we want to be thinking about those that promote that mathematical thinking, that encourage learners to use their vocabulary and their mathematical language. It can be collaborative tasks, either with a partner or within a small group, but it's going to promote and allow learners to demonstrate that flexibility and that ability to connect mathematical ideas and concepts. So that brings us on to our next reflective question. So in your staff teams, we would like you to think about what open-ended, low-floor, high-ceiling starter tasks are you currently using within your practice? And then having a think about everything you've heard, from your master storytelling to number talks to all the other strategies we've just shared. Are there any that you would like to try and add into your practice in the coming weeks? So if you could pause the video now and discuss in your staff teams. So this next section of our professional training is going to focus on counting development and the importance of including this within your practice. On the screen, you can see a QR code, and this is the link to the National Counting Series Padlet. For any of you that haven't heard of this or haven't come across it, it is a really valuable piece of training that was done by Education Scotland, and it has lots of videos and resources as part of it, so hopefully you'll find this really useful. So within our new progression pathway at both first and second level, there is a whole section on counting development. And this outlines the key steps or key different elements that you need to think about when working at that phase. So we just want to highlight within this, there is the abbreviation FNWS, and that stands for forward number word sequences, so counting forwards. You will then see the abbreviation BNWS, which stands for backward number word sequences, which just means counting backwards. This language you will see reflected within SEAL, so this is where that has come from. So within our academic yearly overview, you will notice that counting development features in every block throughout the year. And this is because we want to give our learners lots of opportunities to develop and extend their counting skills and their confidence with this. But this doesn't just mean counting forwards. We really want to emphasise the power and importance of backwards counting. And we know that the stronger learners are with this, the easier subtraction becomes in developing those subtraction strategies. We want to give our learners, as they progress through primary school, opportunities to be able to count in multiples, We want our learners to not just be able to count with whole numbers, but be able to count in decimals as again they progress up and into second level. And we want to be considering how are we using concrete and pictorial approaches to really support counting development. So I'm now going to pass you over to Liz Pinder, who's going to share a little bit more about early counting development. We really want to emphasise the importance of using concrete manipulatives and pictorial approaches as part of counting development within your class. So this might be in the example you can see on the screen, maybe using Numicon pieces to practice counting in twos. Then you could link this really nicely with your 2 times table development. You can also see the counting stick, whereby post-its or bits of paper have been stuck on counting up in twos. And the importance is remembering not just going forwards, but also thinking about that backwards counting. The white and red little stand that you can see is known as a hide and see flip chart stand. And again, it's really nice for allowing learners to practice counting forwards and backwards or counting in multiples. And you can hide some of the little screens and they've got to work out what is behind the screen. In relation to pictorial approaches, just really nice to be remembering to use your 100 square. Do you have this up in your classroom? Can you write on it as part of doing your counting development work? When you're practicing oral counting with your class, a really nice strategy to use is that of the counting ladder. And this is whereby learners use their hands. So as they're counting forward, their hands will go up each time. And then as they're counting backwards, their hands will start up high and then come down each time. And this can just be a really nice way for getting their bodies involved, encouraging them to get moving as part of practicing their oral counting skills. That brings us on to our next school-based reflective question. So we would like you to now think about what counting strategies do you currently use with your learners, also thinking how often do you include some form of counting development within your practice, and what CPA approaches do you use to support counting development. So if you could pause the video now and discuss in your staff teams. So within this training, we've now covered rich starter tasks and thinking about counting development as part of your numeracy and maths lessons. But we're now going to move on to think about that kind of main body of your lesson and what that might look like. Now on the screen in front of you, you can see some key statements that have been taken from Higgius 4 2.3 around effective teaching, learning and assessment. And these are things just to be thinking about and considering as we move through the next section of our training today. So firstly, we just want to emphasise the importance of embedding CPA approaches within your practice. So the C standing for concrete manipulatives, that could be real life objects, or it could be objects such as bundling sticks or Numicon or place value counters. The P standing for pictorial approaches, so that could be number lines, that could be part whole diagrams, bar models, and then the A standing for the abstract part of that approach. Session 5 of our professional training session explores different types of CPA resources in much greater depth, and so we would highly recommend engaging with session 5. So but today we just really want to emphasise the importance of making these resources accessible to all learners within your classroom, and the importance of being able to explicitly teach using that resource. So learners get confident, they get to understand the resource, and they get to understand how it can support their mathematical thinking. Our progression pathways at early first and second level are going to provide you with guidance and clarity around what key strategies are most effective or most suitable for that particular stage. And within that, there are lots of examples peppered throughout the pathway of what that might look like. And this is just to provide support, it's just to provide extra information. And it's not to say that these are the exact examples that you have to use, it's just to hopefully provide that extra guidance and support around the different strategies. Within the pathway as well, there's the breakdown of vocabulary to try and help guide you with the key words that we would like encouraged and taught explicitly at first and second level. And then also within the pathway, we have the guidance around the CPA approaches. So that's the kind of darker turquoise strand that you will see throughout the pathway. And again, this is not to say that these are the exact ones you have to be using, but these are the ones that we would advocate and that we would encourage that are really going to help support you in teaching and delivering that concept. But the progression pathway is there to really help support you with that main body of your lesson, to help guide you with the strategies and with the content. So hopefully your planning will be a lot easier, and hopefully then this will help provide that clarity within your teaching. So within the main body of our lesson, we need to think carefully about the balance of approaches that we're using. And on the screen in front of you, you can see the stages of practice model that was provided by Rose and Shine, and Tom Sheridan has done further work on this. But you can see where we have about guiding students' practice, and then that transition towards independent practice. And that's what we just want to think about. We could spend a whole CAT session exploring this over an hour and a half, but this isn't the focus for today. So we just want to think carefully about how are we giving our learners the opportunities for guided practice? What does that look like in our classrooms at the moment? On the screen in front of you, you can also see the diagram of the I do, we do and you do model. That has been on the go for quite a wee while now and has been strongly encouraged in SBC. So we're going to move on to really think about that guided practice and within that main body of your lesson around modelling. So modelling in itself is a very vast area of research, and if this is something that your school are particularly focusing on or really keen to dive deeper into, there is specific training around modelling within Schoolhouse, if this is something that you would like to have more of a lens or focus on. But today we just want to think about a couple of kind of key high-level things in relation to numeracy and mathematics. So as practitioners, we're modelling so many things within the classroom, but in relation to numeracy and maths, we're particularly modelling strategies. And as we're doing that, we want to be showcasing our own mathematical thinking and talking our learners through those steps. So we're breaking things down into small chunks and then sharing that thinking with the learners so they're hearing that and experiencing that as we work through a problem and demonstrate a particular strategy. As we're modelling, we want to be talking through the mathematical language. We want to be really explicit and really clear on this. That's going to be really important. And we want to ensure that we're giving our learners those sentence stems and prompts to be able to share their own ideas, their own strategies, and their own mathematical thinking. So these are some of the key things that we're going to be modelling within our numeracy lessons. Now, we all know that it's important to model examples, but Jo Bowler has some really interesting thoughts on that in her book about mathematical mindset. So I would strongly recommend reading that if you've not already seen this book. And she advocates that most examples that we practice in the classroom are quite simplistic versions. And sometimes that doesn't give the children the full sense of what something is. So take, for example, a right angle. Quite often in the classroom we might demonstrate that with a vertical and a horizontal line, and quite clearly almost what Jo Bowler describes as the perfect case of a right angle. And what she really advocates for is that we want to give children what we call those boundary examples. So those examples that don't meet that kind of normal definition that we expect. And sometimes it's also really useful to demonstrate non-examples or incorrect examples with learners where they're having to identify and spot where the errors are. So she really strongly suggests thinking about the diversity in the examples that we give our learners and the importance of this for them developing that full understanding of a concept. In relation to modelling, Tom Sheridan has written quite an interesting article about this. The QR code is on the screen in front of you, and if this is something that you're wanting to dive deeper into as a school, then that might be of use to yourselves. In relation to the guided practice and the modelling, this might either be done within your whole class, where your learners all have individual whiteboards and are maybe, as then you're modelling, they're then having the chance to practice examples, or this might also be done within smaller flexible working groups. So we're now going to dive a little bit deeper into flexible working groups and just consider a couple of key things. So I think researchers have grappled for decades around whether we should have ability groupings. Should we be splitting children into sets, or should we be just more teaching to whole class? And I think it's really interesting to consider the shift that's happened in England over the last 15 years. So they've moved to the mastery model, whereby they're teaching everything far more at whole class, and not just the starter tasks, but throughout the whole lesson. And they really have that analogy of going slow to go fast. So meaning that they really need to start building that conceptual understanding and taking a really slow pace to get those initial foundational building blocks before they start to try and increase the pace for everybody. But we all know that we learn things at different rates and we pick up things differently to each other. And what they try really hard to do in the mastery model is really teach for depth. So they'll maybe focus in on one thing and they'll explore that into kind of great detail. I think within our current Scottish system, because we've not been working within a mastery model, it's very difficult and maybe within many classes too challenging just to jump straight into that. So at the moment within this training, what we've advocated so far is that if possible to have a whole class rich starter task where you've got that mixed ability groupings, and you might get that through your visibly random groups. So we've explored that so far and the power of that. We've also explored number talks and how through doing that whole class, children can learn from each other, they can pick up different strategies and ideas, they can learn and share their vocabulary, which can be really rich and strong. So again, we would encourage that whole class. Similarly, maybe doing your introduction to a new concept or tapping into learners' prior knowledge, you might want to tackle that whole class to really just unpick what learners have retained, what they've remembered, and allowing all learners within the class to be exposed to that. But at points, you might want to have flexible working groups. And what that means is you might want to pull a group of learners within your class to maybe either practice a particular strategy or concept or idea. Through a flexible working group, you'll be able to unpick learners' misconceptions and maybe actually find where that little gap is, and then maybe help to give a little bit more modelling and a little bit more instruction to help support learners develop their thinking within that. It's also a nice time just again model other examples and allow learners to use that mathematical talk, but within a smaller group situation where some learners might lack confidence within a whole class, they might be able to explain their thinking and their ideas and strategies. So what we're advocating at the moment is that we think there is still a place to have flexible working groups. But I think there's quite a lot of thinking to unpick within your own school as to whether you have those groups named, that the learner is aware of the name of the group, or whether actually just you yourself as the teacher is aware of the names of your groups, and rather than making that explicit to the learners. That brings us on to our next reflective question of today. So we would like you just to take a few minutes in your staff teams and discuss how do you currently organise your learners. Do you use flexible fluid groupings? Do you name your groupings? Do you try and avoid that? Or do you teach maybe more with the mastery style, where maybe you're teaching most of your content to whole class with then maybe slight differentiation? So if you could pause the video now and just discuss how you organise your learners within your own classroom. Thank you very much for completing that reflective question in your staff teams. So we now just want to move on and share a really useful website, and that is Enrich. So if you haven't heard or used Enrich before, we'd really strongly recommend scanning the QR code that you can see on the screen in front of you. Enrich has lots of really lovely, rich mathematical tasks. Lots of their tasks are suitable for different ages, and they have a variety, and they guide you with what resource is suitable for what age and stage on the website. But a lot of these tasks are open-ended, and they're going to promote many of the things that we have advocated in relation to mathematical reasoning, mathematical problem-solving skills. So we'd strongly recommend using Enrich as part of your numeracy and maths planning and teaching, and can be really nice. It's not to say that you're going to use this every day, but again, just lots of nice tasks and activities that you might want to feed in to part of that culture within your classroom. So the next resource and website that we would really like to promote today is that of U Cubed. And this website has come from Joe Bowler. So on this website, there is a wealth of free and inspiring ideas, information, and different tasks and activities for learners. There's planned and different resources as part of the week of inspirational maths lessons, which is available on the website. And these are pitched at different levels and also on different themes, so they'll suit all ages. There's also different lessons that integrate brain science with mindset, and then other important messages that we want to get across to our learners. Joe Bowler has also produced a range of teacher books, and these are called Mindset Mathematics. So you can see that, the front cover of one on the screen in front of you. And this gives a multitude of excellent ideas and resources and lots of different tasks and activities that you can do with your learners that are really promoting the open, rich thinking that we're really wanting to establish. So if you're not familiar with U Cubed, we'd really strongly recommend spending some time on the website and having a good look. The Mindset in Mathematics books, there's like one almost for each stage or each year, and they are about £15 to £16 per book, but yeah, I say we'd strongly recommend maybe exploring a few of these. So the deliberate practice component of our lesson is really crucial, and we need to think carefully about how this looks. The balance of this might look different across your teaching week, where some days you've got far more modelling and teacher-directed instruction, where you're trialling examples together. Other days you might have children working more independently, and it needs to be what's right for your class. But today we're just going to unpick a couple of the key kind of high-level messages around deliberate practice and some suggestions. And this is just a few different ideas of things we want to think about. So we've already spoken about the importance of embedding CPA approaches, and we really want to continue this within the deliberate practice phase, because this is going to allow our learners to really build those visual representations and models in their head and allow them to see those mathematical structures through that concrete or pictorial approach. So that's really crucial, that it's not that we're taking those away at this point. This is where we really need them within this deliberate practice phase. Within this phase as well, using the whiteboard and whiteboard pen is going to be really important for learners. There's so much research to say that them using this non-permanent surface can really support their ability to have a try, practice strategies, develop that growth mindset where they're not worried about making mistakes and they're not worried about getting things wrong. And that's really important, that we want to really instill within this deliberate practice component. The whole focus of the deliberate practice is to build our learners' confidence, to allow them to develop their knowledge and their skills, to allow them just to figure out their mathematical thinking and try things. So something else obviously in this phase that's really important is giving those practical tasks, those opportunities, whether that be indoors or through your outdoor learning. But in maths, that might be your measuring, your sorting, your exploring in relation to shape, colour, pattern. These things are all really fundamental and really crucial that we're thinking about when are we giving our learners the time. We know there's lots of key mathematical tools that are important, and we want our learners to become skilled with these. So it's thinking about within this deliberate practice time, when are you bringing in these tools and when are we giving our learners the chance to become competent and to become successful in knowing how to accurately use them. We've already spoken about using the websites like Enriched or U Cubed to support you with those rich kind of problem solving open tasks. and they are important as well within this practice phase, that you are giving learners the opportunity to be exposed to those. Deliberate practice doesn't mean that they're doing everything independently. You want to again get the balance between learners doing some stuff independently, but some stuff collaboratively, or within with a partner, or within small groups. So again, you're getting that mathematical thinking. And the other thing that we want to obviously touch on are textbooks. There's still definitely a place for textbooks. We are 100% not saying throw out textbooks. They can be really powerful for allowing you to practice either a particular strategy or thinking closer about a particular concept or skill. But again, just being mindful that is the textbook giving those varied types of questions, and they're not all looking the exact same. Because what the evidence and research is strongly suggesting is that with deliberate practice, we shouldn't be practicing the same thing over and over again, because that's just going to lead to boredom. And deliberate practice, we want to keep it varied and interesting and giving lots of different types of examples. So whether that's be using the textbook or using maybe White Rose Maths as a resource, but again, it can both be really useful. The other thing that we've spoken about earlier in the presentation is just the use of interleaving, and where maybe at points, this might be at the end of a week, at the end of a fortnight, at the end of a teaching block, that you are interleaving, which means that you're bringing in questions from other concepts that are maybe quite closely linked or quite closely relevant, but you're thinking about that. And again, so just to sum up, we're getting the balance of approaches within the deliberate practice. But that whiteboard and whiteboard pen can be so powerful for allowing learners to really unpick their thinking and to share their strategies and ideas. So that brings us on to think about and consider the plenary aspect within your lesson. Now this, similarly to the deliberate practice, this might look different across the week in relation to what you include or what activities or tasks you decide to do. And that's going to ensure that it stays variable and it stays enjoyable for the children. So your plenary might not always look the same. Throughout your lesson, you are going to be doing that continuous formative assessment. So you're already going to have a lot of feedback around how your learners are responding to that concept or skill or piece of content that you are delivering. But the plenary is a really nice opportunity just to reflect on that learning tension and on your success criteria, and really think, where are my learners at now, and what is then going to be my next step for tomorrow or the next day. And one of the main key ways we're going to do that is through questioning. Now in session 4 on assessment, we explore questioning in depth. So we're just touching on it here today, but that is something we're definitely coming back to. But that's going to form a really important bit. So we're not just asking those key questions at the start of our lesson, but we're coming full cycle and really thinking about those powerful questions at the end of our lesson as well. This is where digital tools might be really useful and really powerful to help support you with your plenary and determining your next steps for your learners. Quizzes can be a really effective way to do that, and again, that's something that we will come on and discuss, but that could be things like either through Microsoft Forms or Kahoot. And that could just be a few questions, or it could be multiple choice, but to determine what your learners, where their understanding is at. It could be a repetition of the starter tasks and ideas that we shared at the beginning of the training today, whether that be a think board for them to show those mathematical connections, whether that be a new which one doesn't belong, and you're hoping that their understanding has been extended and developed. It could also be a particular self or peer assessment strategy, and again we'll come on and explore more of that in session 4. So it's just to say that it is a really important part of your lesson, and it's really going to give you that valuable information about what your next steps are with your learners. So we're just now going to return to our aims from the start of our session today and just reflect on these. So hopefully through our training input, you feel you've developed a better understanding about how to effectively structure a numeracy and mathematics lesson that's based on research and evidence. Hopefully you've also developed your understanding and confidence and knowledge around retrieval practice, deliberate practice and what that means, and then the interleaving of concepts and thinking about how you could maybe do that. And thirdly, hopefully you feel you've developed an understanding around those rich mathematical tasks and also maybe now have some support as where to access these, thinking about U cubed and Enrich. So that brings us towards the end of our professional training session for today. So I would just like to take the time to say a huge thank you for your time, effort and energy engaging in all the reflective questions and the follow-up tasks, and for listening to all the content throughout. I really hope you found it useful and enjoyable. We would hugely appreciate getting a little bit of feedback from yourselves. So if you could scan the QR code now in your staff teams, and we would really like to find out what worked well today, what have you enjoyed, what have you maybe gotten the most out of that you would like to take forward, and what could make these sessions even better. Thank you very much. So this final slide is just to share some professional reading that has really informed our thinking around this professional training session for today, and also to share a podcast which is really interesting and really useful, and where they fully discuss lots of different maths topics and concepts. So yeah, I hope you find the further reading helpful and enjoyable, and if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you again.